Election Board Trip. I'm Carol Park, your moderator for today's show. And we thank you for participating in this inaugural event sponsored by the Press Enterprise, the Beaumont Cherry Valley Recreation and Park District, and Mount San Jacinto College. We're conducting 25 forums around Western Riverside County. Today, we're here in Riverside. Tomorrow in San Jacinto. Thursday and Friday, we will be in Menifee. All of these forums will be streamed live on the internet here on pe.com and on ustream.tv. The videos can also be viewed on demand at pe.com on our political road trip website. This is our fourth forum of the day, and the first one involving a city council. We'd like to welcome the candidates for the city of Moreno Valley, the second largest city in Riverside County, and one that has seen periods of explosive growth, coupled with rapid declines, especially during the Great Recession. The city has more than 180,000 residents. It contracts its police and fire services with the county of Riverside. While it has faced economic challenges, development is underway in the city's east end on a Skechers distribution facility and the March Life Care Project on the old March Air Force Base. The city council has 5 seats and is divided by council districts. There are 2 seats available for the council on the November 2nd ballot. Let's meet the candidates for District 2. District 2 covers much of the northwest side of the city. Jose Hector Ramirez, a labor relations representative, is not here in attendance today. Richard A. Stewart, a councilman and attorney. Marcia Amino, a social worker. And Alvin C. Horn, a retired operations manager. Let's meet the candidates for District 4. District 4 covers the south side of the city, and the candidates are randomly drawn, Gwendolyn Cross, a businesswoman who is also not in attendance today, and Marcelo Coe, a business owner who is also not in attendance today. And finally, we have Bonnie Flickinger, the current mayor. We will now begin with a 2-minute opening statement from each of our candidates. Let's start with Jose Hector Ramirez, who is not here. Let's move to the next person, Richard Stewart.
Thank you, Carol. My name is Richard Stewart, and I'll try to be fast because we have very little time. Education-wise, I have an A degree, a BA degree from Cal State Northridge University, an MA from Northern Michigan University, Juris Doctorate from California Southern Law School, and I'm a graduate of Air Command and Staff College for the Air Force. I am an attorney and have passed the bar in 1983 and have been an attorney ever since. I'm also a graduate of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Academy for the Reserves. Experience-wise, I've been as council member for 5 terms. I'm on the March Joint Powers Commission since it began, first as the alternate and now as a voting member, and on this current term I happen to be the chairman. We did a lot over there, and we are doing more. I'm on the Boy Scouts of America, California Indian Empire Council over in Redlands, which covers the Moreno Valley Paris area as well as most of all of Riverside County. I'm presently and still am a reserve deputy sheriff with Riverside County since 1992. Have been with reserve with Merced County and also Los Angeles County. Economic development, we're constantly working on that. It's a never-ending problem, and we expect to be able to get some more economic development this year. We need to work more with the schools, and we have a present situation right now where we are undertaking initial planning for a joint use football stadium at Canyon Springs High School that will be lighted. And we'll be doing that with some money from Chevron Oil Company. We hope that works out. I believe the city of Moreno Valley has a long ways to go in business-friendly improvements. We have a lot of good things we've done, and there's a lot of things that we have yet to do. Graffiti program is one of the best, speed humps, and keep the street lights on.
And before we go to the next candidate, I would like to remind everyone to please use their microphones as they speak today. Thank you. And next up is Marcia Amino.
Good afternoon. I'm Marcia Amino, candidate for the District 2 City Council seat as well. I'm a 22-plus year resident of Moreno Valley, living in District 2, married, 2 children. I've been a volunteer in the city off and on throughout the years, past chairwoman on the Park and Rec Committee. I've also hosted crime prevention seminars and workshops to help women and children. I'm currently a social worker. I work in the juvenile justice program with the County of San Bernardino. I work with a tough crowd. I work with adolescents who are on probation or they're in juvenile hall. Through this position, I have learned problem-solving skills. I've learned to work with a great many diverse people, families, agencies, and I've learned to be a problem solver as well as to look for the positive rather than just simply going back to the negative. I believe I can bring those skills to Moreno Valley City Council seat if I am elected. Today it seems as if most governments, including our local government, believe that they don't need to work for the people. I believe it's the other way. I think government should work for the people, for all the people. It's my firm belief that unless business as usual practices of our city are stopped, such as city manager candidates bringing their own contracts and having them approved, much as the city of Bell, clandestine meetings where the public is not privy and it is not told what is going on, such as secret committees to vet applicants, that we're not going to continue to go forward. I think that we have a trust deficit in our city. I think that the practices that have shown that have been commonplace, I should say, are not helpful to anybody. And I think unless we can start to restore the trust in our community, in our people, in our government, we're not going to be able to get jobs, we're not going to be able to go forward, we're not going to become a first-class city, we're going to continue going backwards. And I'm tired of that. I don't think that's acceptable, and that is why I'm running. Thank you.
And next, Alvin C. Horn.
Good afternoon. My name is Alvin Horn. I'm running for the City Council in District 2 also. My experiences with I was in the Air Force. I joined the Air Force at a young age. And after the Air Force, I went to college on the GI Bill. Then I started to work with in the school districts and also with the city of Los Angeles. Then I began to work with General Service Administration, where I was a field office manager for about 18 years. I started off there, it was a refrigeration air conditioning mechanic with their management training program. And then as a field office manager, after 14 months on a 2-year program. I went to Las Vegas. I handled the whole southern part of Nevada as a field office manager. Then went back to San Francisco as a field office manager, then back into Los Angeles. I retired from Orange County, where I managed large federal properties. We had to be over 4 million square feet to be at the level I was working from. Then after retiring from that, I went to work for a school district. I worked as the director of maintenance operations there for about 11 years before I retired. And since retirement, I moved to Moreno Valley. I've been in Moreno Valley now for about 10 years, where I volunteered for the Parks and Recreation Commission, where I was as vice chair on that. I worked on the grand jury for 2 years, where we did visit various cities and look at their operation. The major things I found in the cities were the lack of policy and procedures and the lack of proper oversight. That's why I decided to run for city councilman, to bring proper oversight and help create jobs in the city and protect the citizens of the city. Thank you.
And finally, we have Bonnie Flickinger.
Thank you. I will talk briefly about how the City of Moreno Valley has improved during my tenure on the City Council, particularly in the field of public safety. The city's major crime rate is lower now than it has ever been in the history of the city. In the year I was elected, we had 72 major crimes per 1,000 residents, 72. This year, that number is 32 crimes per 1,000 residents. When we think about homicides, sometimes we think about street crimes, but when homicides are counted, they also include bodies which were killed somewhere else but dumped in Moreno Valley. Those become Moreno Valley homicides. It also includes the shaken babies. In 2008, there were a total of 10 homicides in the entire city for the entire year. In 2009, that number dropped to 6 for the entire year. Gangs, we know, like to mark their turf with graffiti, but they can't do that in Moreno Valley because of a successful anti-graffiti program. In 1993, we experienced 500 incidents of graffiti in a 2-week period. And it was then that I was instrumental in establishing a 3-pronged anti-graffiti program. It is so successful that I routinely make this offer to anyone who lives outside of the city. If you visit my city and you find graffiti anywhere in the 55 square miles of Moreno Valley, I will buy you lunch. I've been making that offer for over 10 years, and I have yet to buy anyone lunch. I have strongly supported and authorized the funding for putting paramedics on all of our fire engines. That means that when a resident dials 911 to report a medical emergency, the first responders on the scene are able to deliver advanced life support, keeping the victim alive for transport to the emergency room. Public safety is a top priority for me. But so is putting our residents back to work. We have a free employment resource center, and we've created over 3,200 jobs in the last 2 years. We are interested in our residents surviving this down economy.
Thank you, candidates. Next, we have a series of questions provided by the staff of the Press Enterprise and readers. You will each have 1 minute to respond to each question. Once again, Alan Hooper is our timekeeper and will notify you when you've reached 30 seconds and when time is up. We have randomly drawn our order, and no candidate will answer a question first for consecutive questions. With that, we move on to the question and answer session and our first question. The first question is for our challengers. What would you bring to the Moreno Valley City Council? And we'll start with Marcia Amino.
Thank you. I would bring some fresh ideas. I would like to see enacted a sunshine ordinance, much like San Francisco, Contra Costa County, and now the County of San Bernardino. I think that the public's business needs to be out in the open, in the light. That takes away any kind of undue influence. And I believe with that, we would have a government that would be open to scrutiny, not having any kind of favoritism, and that it would also improve our image. We have spent thousands of dollars to improve our city's image to no avail. So I believe the first thing is to set a good foundation and to follow that through. I would also bring a different perspective, a problem-solving skill, and also other tools, because we have a wealth of information in our city that include people who have worked in community development and a lot of other venues, and I think that we could learn from them and put them to use. Thank you.
Next, Alvin Horn. What would you bring to the Moreno Valley City Council?
I would bring the trust and accountability to the city council. I think we need to establish policies and procedures for their agendas for their city council. Right now, we don't have a written criteria for the consent calendar. And now you can put anything on the consent calendar. It's at the discretion of the department heads. There's no written procedures on what goes on the consent calendar. I would put, if it's a certain matter coming up, like a contract, if the amendment for that contract was over a certain dollar amount of the original bid, it would automatically go on the consent calendar and be discussed in front of the public so they could be aware of it. Not having 6 amendments approved on one vote on the consent calendar. Like we have the present time. You can have 10 different items or more approved under one vote on consent calendar. There is no reason for that, the public not being aware of what's going on. Thank you.
Excellent. And this next question is for our 2 incumbents. Why are you running for another term? And we'll start with Bonnie Flickinger.
I'm running for another term because there are projects that have begun that have not been finished. I would like to see them finished. We have particularly the Never Again project, which will protect the teenage girls in the city from becoming the kind of easy victim that Norma Lopez was. I want to continue to build up the emergency response force and the public safety. We have a lower crime rate than we've ever had, but we need to be sure that it stays that way. We need to continue moving in that direction. They're just projects that I haven't finished yet, and I'm willing to spend another 4 years working on them.
Richard Stewart.
Well, my answer is sort of the same in the sense that there's a lot of unfinished business. Things that we have to continue working on, of course, are jobs and economic development. That's the big key topic right now, jobs, jobs, jobs. But we've got some other things, one of which was put on delay because of 911, and that is the soccer complex that's to be at March used to be March Air Force Base. It was put on hold after 9/11 because U.S. Customs did not want a soccer field next to their facility because of the potential for a car bomb. And we finally negotiated the transfer of land for us to be able to build that soccer complex, and it's been long overdue. We need expansion of the police station to continue. We've dedicated money to that. We're in the process of doing that. We need a lighted football joint use stadium at Canyon Springs High School. Those kids have to go to a different school to play and to graduate. And last, we just got the beginning stages of the March Healthcare Hospital at the old March Air Force Base, which will be within the city limits when the city does take that over. That's a responsibility of the March Joint Powers, of which I'm a member and the chairman. That healthcare facility will bring literally hundreds, if not thousands, of high-end paying jobs into our city. Thank you.
And on to our third question. The city faces a major budget shortfall of $12 million. How would you bridge that shortfall? And this question is going to be started off with Alvin Horn.
To bridge that shortfall, I would look at the spending problems that's going on within the city. We get a lot of money on grants, and we don't look at the money closely with the grant money where we spend it. We don't start questioning it until the money starts running low. And then we talks about, we ask if it's coming out of the general fund or not. And that's one of the areas that I think we should be looking at how this money is spent before it becomes getting short. We should have accountable spending throughout a year, not just when the money's getting short, not ask questions at that time. The budget's getting in deficit, closer in deficit. Thank you.
Next, Bonnie Flickinger.
Yes, we dealt with an $18 million budget deficit last year, and we're faced with a $12 million budget this year. One of the things we need to be sure that we do is to keep the state legislature from taking any more of our money. We sent them $5 million this year. We need to be sure that our relationships with our legislators and the governor's office are strong so that we can protect our revenues. We hope that we will pass the TOT tax, the transit occupancy tax, on this November ballot. We need to enhance our revenues. We've certainly cut back on expenditures over and over and over again. We have the employees on furlough. They're not working on Fridays and they're not paid for Fridays. We have cut back in so many areas that it's going to be challenging to find more places to cut expenses. But we can enhance the revenues if we are creative. We will look at some other areas and find out where we can get more revenue.
Great. And Richard Stewart, how would you bridge that $12 million shortfall?
Well, I've been thinking about this a long time, and last go around, last year when we did this budget, I had some ideas, some of which we followed slightly, but now with all of the publicity about pensions and benefits and salaries, we need to get a little heavier into that. The city contributes 100% of the retirement benefits for the city employees. We need to take a look at that. Maybe the city employees could contribute 1 or 2% of that. That needs to be looked at. The benefits package needs to be looked at. The salaries. If you've got a secretary or an administrative assistant that's making almost $50,000 perhaps, you could advertise that in the public and you could probably have 1,000 people lined up to get that job. I don't mind the transit occupancy tax. Everybody has it. Our residents don't pay it here. They pay it elsewhere. That's okay, but no new taxes otherwise. The taxpayers right now are overburdened. We need to cut back, we need to streamline, and we need to contract out if we have an underused department, and we do have one, and that's planning services development. We need to contract out where necessary what would save us money.
And Marcia Amino, how would you bridge that $12 million shortfall?
Well, it's actually $12 to $15 million. And one of the things that I would do is I would work to abolish the $600 car allowance that each council member gets, 2 of whom don't take it at this time. I think we don't need to pay people to come to work. I would like to see renegotiations with management to stop car allowances for them. I believe that employees can use city cars or they can put in a claim and be reimbursed. I think there should be a freeze on spending right now. I think that there is a lot of frivolous spending going on. I also believe that we need to get a grip on the credit cards. City credit cards are quite an issue. I know there's a current city council person who wanted to look at data and forms from that, and it would have been thousands of dollars. I think we need to not pay volunteers $5,000 a year who are working on the 4th of July parade. With all of that, I think there's a lot of room that we can cut. Thank you.
Great. And question 3. If cuts had to be made, what areas would you cut? And this question, we're going to start off with Alvin Horn.
If cuts had to be made at the present time, I would look at the contracting out part of their services that they're just looking at now. I wouldn't contract out all of the employees just by not looking at it first, see what areas that the service is really not needed in, and not just going by what other cities are doing, but looking at what's really needed within the city of Moreno Valley, such as in the Parks Department. There is some services that's being provided that we could take a closer look at and make sure there is a need for it before we go any further with them. Thank you.
And Richard Stewart, if cuts had to be made, what areas would you cut?
Well, we've already made some cuts. We did a lot of different areas. And I guess my best way to answer that is where the cuts wouldn't be made. And that is the police services, the fire services, the animal control, and the roads, and the streetlights, and the parks and recreation, which is actually funded differently. Because much else beyond that is generally considered to be nice to do or fluff. And that means that if you have some of those services that are not included in the basics of government, then you can cut them. You can reduce them. You can also go to contract, as has been mentioned, very carefully if you can save money in doing that. But the cuts need to start at the bottom with the least important things and leave the police and the fire, the roads and the streetlights and the parks alone. If we get down to that's no one else at City Hall except the person to turn the lights out, and police and fire and animal control and the roads, then that's fine, because that's much else beyond that is basic fluff. The basics of government are basic things that everyone is concerned about.
And Marcia Amino, if cuts had to be made, what areas would you cut?
Well, again, I would hope to renegotiate some of the benefit packages and decrease them. I would also want to look at the pension load because it's pretty heavy, and I don't think the city can afford to continue paying retirees medical costs. I think that those are areas. I think the electric company in the city, which is a loser at this time, should be revisited. If it's not going to sustain and it's not going to make a profit, or at least hold its own, maybe we should think about getting rid of that. I also believe that we should, again, curtail the spending of the credit cards. I also believe that we should totally look into the spending practices that we are doing, maybe even freeze some of the capital spending projects. I say this because yesterday Bloomberg had an article about we are in depression-like conditions, and it's not going to get better for a while, and we need to get serious and we need to get creative.
Thank you. And Bonnie Flickinger, if cuts had to be made, what areas would you cut?
Last year, or the year before, when we first started getting hit by lower revenues, we had the city's financial staff put together what's called a deficit reduction plan, a list of many, many cuts that could be made to save the taxpayers' money. We divided them into those that would have very little impact on the community and those that would have major impact on the community. We need to look at that list again and find out which ones we can adopt now that we have not adopted earlier, and see if we can minimize the impact on the community. We also had this problem back in the 1990s, and one of the things that we did at that time was we consulted the city departments, the city employees, and we said, look around in your department and tell us, how could we do things less expensively in your department? How could we save money there? And we got a lot of good suggestions from the people who are out there where the rubber meets the road. We need to do that again.
All right, and moving on to question 4. The city of Moreno Valley bore the tragedy of the murder of Norma Lopez and a stabbing death outside of the Moreno Valley Mall. How do you propose keeping citizens safe? And we're going to start off with Marcia Amino.
I feel that there should be absolutely no cuts in public safety, but I also believe that the police department in Moreno Valley should follow a law like what Santa Monica PD does. When there are gruesome crimes and situations that occur, they hold town hall meetings with the citizens. They meet with them, they talk with them, they also discuss ways to avoid having repeated conditions that occurred. I think that we also need to bolster the neighborhood watch, maybe a block parent. I think that we need to also have programs in our schools that really get through to our teens, especially our girls, that safety is so important. A lot of our teenage girls and our teenagers at large just have a tendency to not understand they are not invincible. And unfortunately, occurrences happen that should not. I just think the city needs to come together as a whole and be vigilant, and I thank you.
And Bonnie Flickinger, how do you propose keeping citizens safe?
Number one, we need to exercise the leadership that recognizes the fact that these incidents are rare and unusual incidents, and they made news because they were rare. They don't happen very often here, and that's a fact that has to be passed around in the community. We also need to deal with the perceptions that people think that they're afraid in their neighborhoods because there might be another crazy person running through looking for a Norma Lopez. We need to deal with that. And that's one of the reasons that I have designed the Never Again project, so that we are addressing the teenagers, the teenage girls, and teaching them the 3 rules that they should follow, that they will pledge in order to protect themselves. And in return, we are giving them gifts, a silver bracelet and a button with Norma Lopez's picture on it that says, "Never Again, Norma's Pledge." We want them to be safe, and we are working on having that happen.
And Alvin Seahorn, how do you propose keeping citizens safe?
I think we should devote more money to educating the public and making them aware of their surroundings and having them get more involved in the reporting of different incidents and helping to make it a more safer place. I know we've got 3 more deputies on duty, but that you can't really eliminate the crime by just arresting your way out of it. A lot of people you put into prisons, they come back out and they are worse off. They're more educated on perform the crimes than they did when they went in. A lot of inside of there, they're just getting more educated on how to perpetrate these various crimes. I think we should concentrate more funds on getting the public aware and protecting themselves and reporting things as they see things happen, like neighborhood watches and the various organizations like that. Thank you.
And Richard Stewart.
Well, town hall meetings are great and they make everybody feel good, but the reality is that the rubber hitting the road, the pointed end of the spear, is the police officer. The 3 gang officers that we added were added because at the current level we did not have enough officers to cover the gang detail 7 days, 7 nights a week, and the gangs knew that. They used to show up in the park on a Sunday night when they changed the schedule and say, "What are you doing here? You're not supposed to be working tonight." We need to use gang injunctions. We have failed in our efforts to get the DA to come in and do that. We're hoping that we're going to be able to do that with a new DA coming. We need to basically go out there and shake and bake. The GIFT program is the intervention program to prevent the gangs, to educate the parents, to work with the schools, probation, parole searches. We just got a $500,000 grant for a school resource officer for Rancho Verde High School, and a daytime curfew we implemented. The bottom line is the bad guys know where to go, and they know where not to go. When I was a teenager, we knew where the LAPD juvie officers and traffic officers were hanging out, and we avoided those areas. And I want it to be that people say, we're not going to Moreno Valley because gang officers, traffic officers, police officers.
Thank you. And moving on to question 5. The council has fast-tracked some of its building permit policies to help one developer. Do you think the city should change its policy to benefit future developers? And Marcia Amino, I'll start with you.
Okay. I believe the city should have consistent policies. I do not believe that there should be a benefit for one individual, one developer. I think that, again, hurts our city. It hurts the other businesses. We have a lot of small businesses that don't get that type of support. And fast tracking, I think, every development, every project needs to be individually looked at, but that's why we do have policies and procedures that are to be followed, and they should be consistently followed. When a particular developer that we're talking about he's gotten special treatment. Basically, he has also come back and asked again and again for exceptions and for, cuts, or can I do this later? And I think that hurts our city. It hurts any future projects, and it sets a precedent that we really cannot have forward, and that is a precedent of favoritism, cronyism, and maybe even corruption, and that's not acceptable.
And Bonnie Flickinger, do you think the city should change its policy to benefit future developers?
We have been for some time a business-friendly city, and we intend to be. But the important thing is that our policies apply to everyone straight across the board. We don't play favorites. The rules are the rules, and everyone has to abide by them. If we have rules that need to be changed, then we need to change them for everyone, not just for one influential developer. I think that we need to be careful. We need to carefully consider whether or not our policies are business-friendly, whether or not they induce the creation of jobs. If not, then we need to look at them again and say, why do we have these policies? And are they doing good or not for the city?
And Alvin Horn, do you think the city should change its policy to benefit future developers?
No, I don't think so at the time. It should be changed, but I think you should have standard policies, and you don't do it to benefit one until the policy is changed. And if those policies is not proposed now, they should be looked at before and look at them again and see if they need to be changed. Not just say that they are been left on the books for the convenience of or the staff. They should have been reviewed before now, and in the future, if you think they are not adequate, then change them. But not until they are changed would you make an exception for one person, one developer.
Okay. And Richard Stewart, do you think the city should change its policy to benefit future developers?
Absolutely. Business friendly is a nice phrase, and it's nice to use it. The reality is I hear otherwise. I hear otherwise from business people that are trying to do business with the city. I can tell you that people that have come to the March Joint Powers to do business over there have streamlined through, and that's why you have the buildings in Meridian. And I've been told by the staff at Joint Powers, if those projects had to go through Moreno Valley system, they'd still be in the planning stages. If you want something to get built, you've got to be able to cut the corners. Not the law, the policies. One policy we have is you have to put the security in place 6 weeks before it can get agendized. And there's millions of dollars being spent on that. There's no legal reason to do that. I asked about it, and they said that's for the convenience of staff. 3 projects have been in the city of the consequential size of Skechers. The mall, the county hospital, and Skechers. The mall was a specific plan, made its own rules, didn't follow any policies. They wrote them. The hospital went under county rules and ignored all of Moreno Valley policies. And Skechers, issues have come up that need to be dealt with. You've got to be flexible. In the military, we learn to do that. If the bad guy's over there, you don't drop the bombs over here.
Right. Great. And moving on to question 6. What is your opinion of the March Life Care project? Can they deliver everything they are promising? And Bonnie, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Well, I was doubtful when I first heard about the March Life Care project. It was so immense and so elegant and so elaborate. I wondered whether they could do it. But at each stage along the way, they have been able to accomplish what they said they were going to do. I'm convinced that it is going to happen, and I think it's going to be an outstanding development for the entire region.
Marcia Amino.
I think it's terrific. I think it might also, should it go forward and come to fruition, help UCR perhaps get the medical school that it so badly needs. I don't know how our nationalized health care will affect that, but I hope that it goes forward. I hope it is successful because it will give first-class care, and it will give professional jobs and a lot of trickle-down jobs for people who are semi-skilled or even manual labor. It should be a fantastic project, and I hope that we will have it come to fruition. Again, with the way the economic situation is in this country, not to mention the whole world, and with a lot of the changing laws, it may delay it a little bit. I guess time is going to tell, but I'm hopeful that it will be successful, and it will benefit the residents of our city and the surrounding communities also.
And Alvin, what is your opinion of the March Life Care project, and can they deliver everything they are promising?
It seems to be a good project, and they possibly can. I don't have enough information on it to doubt they can't be successful at the time. The thing I'm concerned about is, in the meantime, it's quite a few years down the road, they're talking about bringing all these jobs in. In the meantime, though, we need to have some other projects going on to take care of the needs of the citizens at the time. But eventually, I think this will be a good project, and it will fulfill everything it says it's going to do, as far as I can tell from the information was available to me at the time. Thank you.
And Richard.
Well, I've been at the leading edge of this one, and I sure hope they can. But in the military, in the 32 years I spent in the military, the one thing I learned is if you have a chance, you improve your position. You don't go back, you don't go sideways. It could be an inch or it could be a mile. And they're planning on starting demolition of some of the buildings, including the old hospital. And they're going to do this at their own expense. If they stopped there and did nothing else, it would be sad. But we would have improved our position, and the next developer to come in wouldn't have to pay the millions of dollars to demolish those buildings. We've got St. Bernardine's Hospital from San Bernardino, as you're familiar with that. Catholic Healthcare West runs them. They're on board. Riverside Medical Clinic, where I happen to go myself, they're on board. We've got some of the biggest players signed on to this. I really hope it happens. But if nothing else, we improve our position. Eventually, when it does happen, this will be part of, I guess, Bonnie's district, because it'll be down in that part of Moreno Valley, but it will eventually be part of the city of Moreno Valley with the thousands of jobs that will come.
Great. And question 7. How would you bring transparency to the hiring of a new city manager? And Alvin, we'll start with you.
I would, one thing, I wouldn't select a secret panel to review this. I would have this done by the city council of this. You would have the city council be totally responsible for the selecting of the city manager and reporting it back to the public when it is accomplished, and not having a secret panel doing the interviews and one thing I was concerned about, it happened the last time, was the interim manager was able to, after the fact, after seeing all the information, put his bid in to become the city manager. I would think that should be placed on the same status as a sealed bid. Like if you have somebody reviewing the bids, you wouldn't have let them put in the bid later on after you've got all the inside information on it. Thank you.
And Richard, how would you bring transparency to the hiring of a new city manager?
Well, let me first reference this so-called secret committee. That committee was not supposed to be secret. It was selected in a closed session, and the city attorney, who has admitted he made a mistake, was supposed to immediately report that out. He failed to do that. He's brand new at the job, made a mistake. He did report it out eventually. Secondly, there were 120 applicants that applied. We didn't pick we don't go through and actually determine the last 6. The consultant does that. This committee was something that's been done in other cities, only looked at resumes and was going to give a recommendation. Mayor Flickinger was present at their discussions and presented that back to the council. You do this professionally because of a lot of reasons. You can ask questions, and the consultant can ask questions. They can ask questions, we can't. And they can find out information, we can't. We had several people eliminated out of the finalists just based on things that they found out about them, wherever. But I think it needs to be done professionally, the same way that you do a hunt for a principal of a school, a superintendent, or a head of a big corporation. It needs to be done professionally. And also, obviously, it's only the council that makes the selection. Thank you.
And Marcia, how would you bring transparency to the hiring of a new city manager?
I would follow what Terry Frank said. Basically, you can have everything out in the public, and I would have it in the public venue. You do not need to disclose personal information. I would not have a committee, and if I had been on the city council and was aware of that, I would have reported that out, or at least talked to the city attorney to make sure that it was reported out, because I believe to date it has not yet been reported on the record. It has been in the newspaper. That way, if everything is out in the open and public, you can see the type of candidates that we are having, respond to our ads, who think that they would like to work here. We could also prevent a candidate bringing their own contract. I don't believe that that's appropriate. I believe that's why we pay city staff and have, human resources and have city attorney, so we can have contracts that benefit the taxpaying residents of our city. In other words, I would keep nothing secret, except, of course, documentation information that needs to be kept private. Thank you.
And Bonnie, how would you bring transparency to the hiring of a new city manager?
Well, I let myself be convinced by others that the Blue Ribbon Committee was a good idea. I know now that the Blue Ribbon Committee was not a good idea, and I would not vote for that again. The decision has to be made by the City Council. But the objective in selecting a city manager is to get the best city manager, the most competent, the most effective city manager that you can, who will operate your city in the taxpayer's best interest. To do that in public is very challenging. How do you say to someone, I'm going to take your application and give it to the newspaper, it's going to be on the front page tomorrow, and everybody's going to know that you're an applicant, including the people you're working for right now? There has to be some limit on the transparency in the hiring of any employee. So you need to be very careful that you protect the privacy of the employees, as well as keep the public informed on what you're doing on selecting the headhunter, for example.
Thank you. And Richard, this is question 8.
Oh, question 8. I was going to get a second chance on the other one.
Serving on a city council is a very demanding commitment. How are you managing work, family, and other obligations?
Well, the family's suffering. The work probably is suffering too. What's changed since I got on the council is there's a tremendous increased use of technology, emails. I am able to check emails. I was in Michigan because of a family emergency, and I was interacting with constituents as well as the city staff members and the local reporter who kept calling me during dinner, not realizing it was a 3-hour time difference. I think the technology really makes a difference. It really, really does. The emailing, using the web. I download at work. I download the agenda. I don't even carry that big book anymore. I can't hardly fit it in the car, and I take it up to the dais. But I'm able to do that from the office. I'm able to do it from home, and I'm able to use my netbook laptop. It's amazing. And of course, we got Cindy down there running our office and keeps us informed of everything that goes on. It's really a full-time job almost. I don't know how I did it when I was full-time military.
And Marcia, serving on a city council is a very demanding commitment. How do you plan to manage work, family, and other obligations with that of serving the citizens of Moreno Valley?
As I always have, my family is very supportive. I have flexibility. I've been at my position long enough with the County of San Bernardino that I have flexibility. And again, technology, phones, computer, various things, and planning ahead and using good time management skills and prioritizing skills would be how I would do it. But I say, if I didn't have the support of my family, it would be impossible. And I have a fantastic supervisor who is very supportive as well. That's how I would do it.
And Bonnie, how are you managing work, family, and other obligations?
Well, the demands on the job depend upon how conscientious you are about it. You can just attend the council meetings and not do anything else, leave everything else up to your staff, or you can be very much involved in your district and what's going on in your district and in responding to your constituents and that sort of thing. I've always been on that side. I discovered early in my tenure, my first time I was the mayor, that my full-time job with a major law firm precluded me from doing the kind of service that I thought I should do to for my constituents and the community. So I quit that job and lost a lot of income for it. Since then, it has been my husband being very supportive of what I was doing. He was a real great partner, but he died a couple of years ago, so that changes my lifestyle entirely. Now I have all of the time that I need to do the work that I'm doing for the community and for my constituents, but I don't have his support anymore. It's okay. I'm still dealing with my responsibilities.
And Alvin, serving on a city council is a very demanding commitment. How do you plan to manage work, family, and other obligations with that of serving the citizens of Moreno Valley?
Well, in my case, I'm retired, and my wife, she's very supportive of anything I would be doing on the city council. She's working at the present time. And what I would do, I would really establish a time frame so I could have office hours open for the public to be able to contact me on a regular basis. Although I know with the technology you can get in touch with a lot of it and do quite a bit of work, but then a lot of people don't have the time. How are you going to get back to them in an adequate time? I'm going to set up a time frame for the office to be open, regular office hours, so they can get in touch with me and express their needs, so I can take care of their concerns.
Great, and we're going to move on to our final question. This one will start off with Alvin. How can the City Council bring more jobs to the city of Moreno Valley?
One way I think they can do it by setting up a task force to make sure that we have the workforce here to handle the jobs, and and be open and transparent to the people on the outside, the other companies on the outside. Establishing credibility within the city council and make sure that, and have a full-time mayor, I think, so you can talk to the different people and not go have a different person talk to them every time you go back to negotiation about something. But I think the best thing would be a task force set up to make sure that we have the right means to attract the different new companies and have sustainable jobs by ensuring that we have a workforce and good policies and procedures in place. And we won't be changing them every few years. And we're giving them incentives to come into the area. Make sure they're going to be credible and sustainable incentives to relocate their business into the areas. And that will be done best with a task force, I believe.
Thank you. And Richard, the question is going to be slightly different for you, slightly modified. What have you done to help bring jobs to the city of Moreno Valley?
Well, personally, when I was mayor a couple of years ago, I was on the phone with the vice president for Target several times at the request of the developer, trying to talk him into why Moreno Valley should be the very first super Target in the entire state of California. Then I flew to Minneapolis on my own dime on the way to a vacation to be able to look at those stores and see what they look like. We need to continuously, aggressively recruit business. We need to travel to the international shopping center conventions. We need to be able to meet with business people. I've done that, having lunch with business owners, usually to showcase a better part of town, like Mimi's. We need to get rid of the staff-friendly processes, and we need to go to business-friendly processes. Staff-friendly is great. It saves some staff work, but it costs the developer or the business person time, and time is money. Delaying a project 6 months because some staff person wants to take a vacation or do something else is not right. We need to be creative, and we need to be aggressive. And by being aggressive, that means you go out and get them. They're not going to come knocking on your door, sitting back having a latte. You need to go out and recruit them.
Thank you. And Bonnie, what have you done to bring more jobs to the city of Moreno Valley?
One of the most important functions of the City Council is to exercise oversight over the city staff. The Economic Development Department is responsible for creating jobs and bringing businesses into the city. I have had a relationship with the Economic Development Director and his department that encourages them to keep job creation on their front burner. We've created over 3,000 new jobs in the last couple of years. I think we're doing the right thing, and we need to continue doing more of that.
Right. And Marcia, how can the City Council bring more jobs to the city of Moreno Valley?
I think the City Council can bring more jobs, again, by having a more transparent, honest government, so the city image is improved. Perhaps more companies and corporations will look at Moreno Valley. I think that the regulations and some of the taxes need to be looked at as well, because if there are impediments to bringing in jobs or bringing in companies, perhaps they need to be changed or they need to be made a little bit smaller. I also think that at this time it's important to retain our small businesses, business retention. I understand that it's a very tough budget cycle right now. It is for small businesses as well, and I'm thinking that perhaps if there's a feasible way that the gross receipts tax could be suspended for a 6-month period or for a year. And I say that because it continues to decrease in the revenue it's bringing in. And with all of those things, it's a fluid. You have to kind of continue building and moving. It's not stagnant. Thank you.
And thank you, candidates. That ends our question and answer session. We will now begin the closing statements. You have the floor for 1 minute, and we are starting in reverse order from the opening statements. So Bonnie, Bonnie, we're going to go ahead and start with you.
Fine. I'm a woman of few words ordinarily. I say what I have to say and sit down, so I won't take your whole minute. But I'm extremely disappointed that there are no other candidates for this office at this forum. This is not the first time that my opponents have not shown up for one of these things, and I think it would be a much more interesting election and much more value to the voters if all three of us were here. That's all.
Okay. Alvin?
Yes,
Could you please use your microphone? Thank you.
Yes, I believe that their voters select an official because they trust in their ability to take care of the business of the city that they don't have the time to check on them. But then they need to trust, but they need to verify. And also the city council is the one to establish the policies. They need to trust and verify too. They need to trust they have a adequate staff taking care of the different day-to-day operations and not micromanage themselves. They need to verify that the things is being accomplished by the staff that they have set the policies for, and that the staff develop procedures to take care of those and implement the policies they have. And that's the reason I wanted to run for city council, to make sure that we did have a proper policies and procedures in place.
Thank you, Alvin. Thank you. And Marcia?
Well, I think that it's time for a new attitude, and I would bring a fresh perspective. I think that there definitely must be a focus on transparency because government does the people's business. The people really are the boss. And so with that, I would ensure that things are transparent. Favoritism is done away with, whether one is a small hamburger stand or whether one is a $1 million developer. They shouldn't be treated differently. It's my belief that everybody's should be treated equally. And I believe that honesty and integrity will help our city turn itself around. I think we have a tough road ahead. Again, we have a huge deficit, but we can't continue to keep doing business as usual and follow the status quo. It's gotten us to where we are now, a $12 to $15 million deficit, and a city image where a lot of people laugh at our city, and I'm really tired of that. I would really like to see that change. That is why I'm running.
And Richard?
Well, I keep hearing transparency and almost in the same phrase, San Francisco, and I'm not sure there's not much in San Francisco I like as far as policies are concerned. The transparency aspect is great when it's appropriate, but there are things such as when you're courting a new large business that does not want their name used. In fact, we don't even tell the city council until they get a little ways down the road because they blab it out and the newspaper gets it, and then their board of directors gets mad. I have been involved in the rebuilding and every single fire station, all of the things having to do with adding a paramedic, 3 ladder companies which we didn't have before, new police station, expanding the police station. The park ranger program was added. We've the lowest crime rate in history, as was mentioned, a conference and rec center, and the Veterans Memorial. Several new parks needed to be added. Soccer fields need to come. We need more jobs. Lighted football stadium at Canning Springs High School, March Healthcare Hospital. It was mentioned that the committee was not reported out. Well, the fact is it was reported out. That's on the record. Not everyone's always there all the time. You have to go to the meetings to hear it get reported out. But that did, in fact, happen. And we are aggressively working for the good of the city.
And thank you, candidates. This concludes our forum for today, and good luck to all of you. We thank you for joining us for this 8th forum of our 25 forums here on PE.com. You can also watch this in its entirety on demand at PE.com. And thank you to our timekeeper, Alan Hooper, and our cameraman, Adam Drexler. Today's webcast has been produced by Angel Ortiz. And also don't forget to vote on November 2nd and join us that night for live election coverage on PE.com. Thank you.